It is Saturday, March 22nd, and welcome to another edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. We so appreciate all the feedback, all the emails, even the comments when we see you out in public, how much you enjoyed the show and the guests that make this show what it is. And we certainly appreciate WGLA 24/7, Howard Sturk Holdings, and everyone that makes this production possible. Now let's get busy. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts issued a statement earlier this week, rightfully pointing out that the judicial branch is constitutionally entrusted with reviewing the legality of executive actions, whether pioneering or otherwise. You recall U.S. District Judge James Boasberg interpreted the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, according to his text, as an example that it applies during declared wars or when a foreign government or nation has invaded the United States. The district judge, however, rejected the argument that an alleged Venezuelan gang was engaged in guerrilla warfare against the United States in cahoots with the Venezuelan government based on a naked assertion by whom? Our President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. But the judicial process does not stop with Judge Boasberg. Our president, which he's quite aware of, and his lawyers, can take his case to the United States Court of Appeals and ultimately to the United States Supreme Court. That's how the rule of law works. But let me just add, President Trump's posting statements denigrating Boasberg as a radical left lunatic of a judge who should be impeached were wildly misplaced and lack wisdom. The United States Chief Justice's response was a model of moderation. For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment, I remind you, is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial review. Let me start with our lawyer in-house, the well-known Mr. Bruce Fein, a constitutional lawyer. How did you react to our president and Judge Roberts' quick response in sending a message to the White House?
Well, I think you have to examine the comment not in isolation, but in the context, Armstrong, of other statements by his aides, Elon Musk, suggesting that the executive branch can decide its own power and would be willing to entertain flouting a court order. That really would escalate this another notch. And I think the Chief Justice was responding to that kind of subtext in President Trump's statement. If you can remove a judge because you disagree with the opinion, you don't need an appeal. Historically, the Chief Justice was referring to the acquittal of then Justice Samuel Chase, who was impeached in 1805 for allegedly making incendiary statements about the Alien and Sedition Act. And that set a precedent for over 2 centuries that you do not impeach a justice or a judge because you think they made an erroneous decision. And that is what the Chief Justice was referring to. Otherwise, you basically turn judicial review into a political football, and we have the law of the jungle rather than the rule of law.
So, Robert Patillo, did Judge Boasberg interpret it correctly? And what precedent does this ruling set for future executive actions related, Robert, to national security?
Well, most assuredly ruled correctly. Look, the Alien Sedition Act, these are a set of laws that were passed in the late 1790s because we were on the precipice of war with France. You had around 25,000 French nationals in the United States. Thomas Jefferson, who was very much a Francophone, was putting out seditious statements against the Federalist government, and for that reason, President Adams decided that he would use a heavy hand in handling these situations. But that being said, this has always been something that takes place in a time of war, because let's think about what the alternative is. If the president can simply sua sponte announce any group as being the enemy and then deport them to a El Salvadorian let's be honest, concentration camp without the due process of law, without the ability for them to have an appeal, then what exactly is our system at that point in time? What are our Western values that we're standing up for? So this is exactly what this judge was ruling on. And the idea that a sitting president would literally flout the rule of law, flout the justice system, tells us that we are headed headlong into a constitutional crisis involving an executive that does not believe in the legitimacy of the court system, and that's a dangerous place for our constitutional republic to exist in.
You know, it's fascinating listening to our legal experts, Mr. Fein and Mr. Patillo, but how is it that everyday Americans perceive this? You got a plane in the sky, supposedly has crossed over international waters. You got 200 or 300 of the most dangerous gang members from Venezuela and other places on that airplane. And in the middle of the flight, the judge has ruled, turn that around and let's bring them back until there's due process. What is the perception of all this, Tyler?
Yeah, well, I mean, the perception is very bad, as you're noting here. What we have is a judge, and this is not coming from a vacuum either. What we've seen over and over again during this administration is these leftist activist groups, many of which I wrote about in my book, The Woktopus, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government, which have been staffing and advising the Biden administration previously. These groups are filing lawsuits to block Trump's orders, and they're choosing specific jurisdictions to file these lawsuits in, aiming to get a judge that aligns with them and getting these nationwide injunctions. And these nationwide injunctions effectively are these judges taking the place of the president, making policy for the time being. You know, they say it's only 14 days. Many of these orders get extended. You know, this is them declaring, and we saw Judge Boasberg say, you need to turn these flights around immediately, as if Judge Boasberg, not President Donald Trump, were the one in charge of our national security. So the administration has picked a fight here, but I think it's rightly picked a fight here. And it was really shocking to me to see the Chief Justice of the United States, Supreme Court, come out and chide Trump amid all of these bevies of orders from these district judges who are putting themselves in the position of effectively
You know, the last time, I will tell you this now, I love this, by the way, but the last time I checked, there were 3 equal branches of government: the legislative, judicial, and the executive. From my perspective, whether you agree with the judge or not, Bruce, the judge was doing his job.
Not only that, and also criticizing, Chief Justice Roberts wrote the opinion last July 1 saying the presidents are immune from criminal prosecution in the Trump versus United States. He's not biased. He's not a leftist.
No,
he's
he's
appointed
not.
by George W. Bush.
No, he's not a leftist.
And moreover, just second here, we have a constitution because certain things are placed beyond election results. The president is obligated to faithfully execute the laws. The judiciary branch since 1803 in Marbury and Madison is tasked with deciding what the law is. If you think the judge has it wrong and it's an emergency situation, you're asking to stay. Yeah, you can go to state.
Just appeal it. Come on, Tyler.
You can do it the next day. In fact, Armstrong is what they've done, but they haven't got any results from the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court.
I don't want to give our audience the impression that this is a rogue judge not doing his job. Trump has all kind of alternatives to this, as he's had in the past, Tyler.
Well, the question is,
okay, what's the question?
Who makes the decision in the middle, in the interim? Like when you have a judge,
the judge halts it until the president appeals it, and you get the ruling, and then the decision is made. But you got to halt it until there's a decision. Come on.
Like why does the judge get to issue the order that makes the policy, that halts the entire policy for the entire
Tyler,
this
come on.
Again and again and again what we've been seeing here. We just saw a judge say that Trump did not have the authority to issue an order saying that those who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria are unfit for military service.
The judge said we must look at the due process to make sure that he's following the law. and then they will rule, Tyler.
Yeah.
That's the review.
No,
but
moreover,
the question is,
Armstrong, let me interject here. The policy was made, the Alien Enemies Act made the policy, Tyler. That was Congress. Congress made the policy in the Alien Enemies Act and said only in times of war or when we're invaded. And the judge said we're not in a time of war or invasion. And if you disagree with the interpretation, you go up to the court. But the issue is whether the president is going to take care to the falls be faithfully executed, because Congress has a role in making the policy.
Let me get Louis.
But in the interim, you have these orders where the judge
I think
says,
it's interesting.
in the
Everyone's
interim, my interpretation stands.
I'm glad you said yours. Your interpretation. That is fine.
You're not a judge.
Yeah, your interpretation. But wait a minute, Tyler. Louis, let me give you the last 2 minutes before we go to break on this topic. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what is interesting of this entire episode is everyone's getting so upset about the balance of power, and that is the beauty of democracy. I think this is a beautiful moment that we're watching, and it is how all three equal branches of government are testing their powers against each other to try and solve the problems that the American people are facing. And we have an executive that is being innovative, if we want to use that word.
Innovative? Innovative? Is that what you call him? Innovative? Oh, please.
What I'm trying to say is, like, what has been happening has not worked, and he's trying to use his interpretation of his executive power, and it's now getting its pushback from the judicial, and also with the calls for impeachment of D.C. District Court Judge James Boasberg. I think Congress also has a role to play there, and Chief Justice Roberts issued his opinion. Congress also will have to make a decision. Speaker Johnson will either have to put all of these articles to impeachment for a vote, to refer them to committee to see what else can Congress do to try and balance what clearly seems to be what Republicans see as a politicized judicial system.
We got a lot of voices going in. Since we have so many voices, I'm going to take a break, because I can tell you it's going to be off the chain here today, and I'm ready for it, baby. I'm ready for it. We'll be back. Let me elevate this discussion somewhat. President Donald Trump has a trifecta. He has the White House, he has the Senate, he has the House. If President Donald Trump, because these executive orders don't last, the next president can come in and change them. I just saw where he announced that he's abolishing, with an executive order, the Department of Education. My question is, why do that if you got Congress that could actually make it the law? That's the process, and it becomes law. Why would you ignore it, having a majority in Congress, and they're going to support whatever you're doing? The only conclusion that you can probably reach, and just as a stretch, whether it's the courts or whether it's the Congress which he controls, is that he wants it to be his decision and his decision alone, and he wants to get the credit for it. That's the only other conclusion. You're shaking your head, Louis. What is it?
I think there's political strategy behind that.
What is the strategy?
I don't think Trump can call Speaker Johnson and say, hey, I want you to pass a bill to abolish the education department, because Republicans won't line up. But if Trump does it,
why won't they line up? Because they don't agree with him?
Wait.
Well,
if
why
Trump
won't they line
does
up?
it with executive order, then Congress has to respond that, hey, that's my prerogative. And then you have grassroots people from MAGA world pressuring all those congressmen to actually do what Trump is saying. So I think it's trying to pressure congressmen into action, because Congress could have been doing this all along. They could have been trimming the budget. They could have been, solving the problems of the American people. But obviously, they're perverse.
So wait a minute. So Robert, are we now saying that Republicans are not in line with the president's ambitious agenda? That's what Louis is saying.
I think that's
I just want to mention I just want to mention for a little, what you just described is literally called fascism, where the democratic process will not support your policy position. Therefore, the strong man pushes through that exact same policy position.
It's not fascism. It's done through votes.
And then threatens the elected officials with a popular uprising against them if they disagree with those policies because he can't pass them through a democratic process.
That people elected Trump and Trump is doing what they voted for?
That is what you described. The words that came out of your mouth, not out of my mouth.
No, it's
That's what you
political
described.
strategy.
What you do not.
It's political
strategy,
and it's
to
within
say,
the
I'm going
realm
to go
of legality.
around the political process. Democracy isn't working, and therefore I want the man in charge just to make the decision regardless of what the people want. If you want something done, you pass it through the House of Representatives. It goes through the United States Senate. You get 60 votes. It goes through reconciliation. It passes judicial review. That's how a democracy makes laws. Simply saying that it won't pass or I did it myself, that is how democracies fall.
So let me move. I want to move somewhere else with Tyler on this. Okay, so Zelensky, bless his heart, has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire, even though the Russians continue to pummel Ukraine. I know the president spoke with Putin for 2 hours this week. I think we'll eventually see what that led to. They agreed to something. I think we're still trying to figure out what that is. But what is interesting is that Western allies, Tyler, are trying to hash out a bold European idea. And guess what that idea is, Tyler? Sending 10,000 to 30,000 troops to Ukraine to help enforce any eventual peace deal with Russia, and with ceasefire talks continuing with the Kremlin. Defense officials from dozens of Western nations, they met in the UK this past Thursday to hammer out the details of how the so-called coalition of the willing, they call it the willing, led by the United Kingdom and France, can help Ukraine deter Russia from attacking in the future. But guess what the caveat is, Tyler? No United States troops would be involved.
Yeah, I mean, if they can work it out, the difficulty right now is Trump has done a great job of bringing Russia to the table, which I think is part of what he's been aiming to do for a little while. Unfortunately, Russia's still in the driver's seat. So the other side, Ukraine, the allies, they have to do something that's going to have some teeth. And, I think the United States is part of this strategizing as well. Unfortunately, right now, Russia is in the driver's seat. Ukraine wants peace. Russia's come to the table, but they're not willing to engage the way that they should. So this is the time when the Ukraine side needs to say something that's going to force Russia a little bit closer to peace. That's what Britain and France are trying to do here. The problem is, Britain and France are our NATO allies. If they get attacked, we are contractually obligated to support them. And this gets into the same sort of problem that we don't want escalation from this war. We want this war to end. So if we can have an agreement, yeah.
Listen, we've seen how this played out before. We had this similar to this fake, fragile agreement that was signed between Israel and Hamas. And where are we right now? They're blowing each other to the blitters, okay? This is what this is. Because we think because they're meeting at the negotiating table that everybody's sincere, but guess what? And Netanyahu, Louis, called Trump before he decided to start blowing up Gaza again. And you know what the president said? Man, do what you got to do. That's what he said. What does that tell you about what's going to happen with Ukraine and Russia in the end? Louis?
I think that all of these conflicts are not going to end. Like, these are existential threats. So Russia is an existential threat to a democratic world system, same as China, same as obviously terrorist organizations funded by Iran in the Middle East. So what's on the table for negotiation is a temporary ceasefire. Even if a quote-unquote peace is reached with Russia, I think that another conflict will
Well, let me stop you there.
Let
me stop you there because you said something interesting. So could this ceasefire provide Ukraine with enough time to regroup and rearm, or does it favor Russia?
I don't think, in my understanding, that there is in the near future any opportunity for Ukraine to regain its full territorial integrity. So I think that what the Trump administration is doing is facing the reality that what we can do is reach a temporary pause in the conflict so that the killings can stop and so that the cards can be reshuffled other than just this war of attrition that will be ongoing and will be depleting Western resources. And if anything, actually strengthening Russia's wartime economy into a war machine and be more ready in 5 years to further attack Europe than right now. So I think what Trump is doing is pressuring European allies into understanding this reality that they also need to be in a wartime economy. They need to start increasing their war production.
Bruce, are you convinced that this White House know what they're doing?
No. This reminds me of the Vietnam talks, on and off, on and off, on and off. Ultimately, they led nowhere except a temporary period before the North Vietnamese captured or conquered the South. I think it's a day-by-day operation. And I don't think that there's any strategy. I don't think there's any plausibility that this is going to be anything different than what you said at Gaza. They haven't agreed that they're going to stop. The forces that have been pledged by France and Great Britain are only if there's peace. There's not any peace. There's not likely to say they didn't really pledge anything. It was a complete hoax. So I think that everybody's just playing it 24 hours and it'll go on and on and on. And I don't think it'll get out of the muddle as far as the eye can see.
So let me come back to Robert. Now, you know, fortunately for us, we have a lot of sources and therefore a lot of insights of what's happening around the world. You may ask the question, why won't Hamas just turn over all the hostages? Well, riddle me, Robert. It's because they know that once they turn over, that last hostage, Israel is going to blow Iran's nuclear reactors to blathers. They're going to take them out. So they're not about to turn over the last hostage because Iran is their sponsor, their money machine, and they want to delay this process as long as possible because they know what happens when they turn over the last hostage, Robert.
Or maybe, and just hear me out, maybe the president should have posted an AI video of him turning the Gaza Strip into a casino with a giant golden statue of himself.
Let's be serious.
And bearded men. No,
please,
Armstrong. Listen to what I am saying. If you're talking about Hamas, and you know the minute you turn over the last hostage, the president of the United States is going to greenlight Israel turning the Gaza Strip essentially into beachfront property, then why exactly would you enter the negotiating table just want to turn over the last hostage? Why, if the person you're negotiating with has basically posted a video saying he wants the complete and total destruction of your civilization, at what point in time would you turn over those hostages and return to the negotiating table? This is as idiotic as the agreement in Doha with the Taliban. These people have no concept of what they're doing when it comes to negotiating on the international stage. They are guessing day by day, and they're putting national security and international security at risk. And on that point of Ukraine, Russia is demanding that the Ukrainian government, the international community, recognize Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, Donbass as being part of the territorial expanse of the essentially Russian Empire, in addition to recognizing Crimea. That will give Russia a foothold, not just in the Sea of Azov, but also the Black Sea, opening up international shipping lines, changing the geopolitical choke points that are available going forward. This is what Russia has been hoping for since the end of the Cold War. And the fact that we will put that on the negotiating table and get absolutely nothing back in return because you quote unquote want peace is not just a rookie mistake. Ask Ryan Macbeth on this. It is an abdication of the power that is invested in the hegemonic leader of the Western Alliance, and America is at a low point when it comes to the international order.
Tyler?
It's not an abdication.
Are you speechless? I thought you were speechless there for a minute.
I was.
I mean,
just the level he goes to from one of these things. Yes. I'm like, all right, what's fascism? Is it fascism to weaken the size and scope of the federal government? I don't know. That doesn't sound like fascism to me. Is it abdicating our national responsibility to no longer just give blank checks of money to Ukraine, which we already know is one of the most corrupt countries on earth, which, yes, they got attacked by Russia. We don't want Russia to be steamrolling into Europe. But what we're trying to do is have a peace that's going to allow, like, This war has weakened Russia. We saw Sweden and Finland join NATO. This is like a historic move here to weaken Russia's ability to bring back the Soviet Union. It's not coming back. I got a message for you. Tsarist Russia is not coming back. And
it's also, I think it's missed in the conversation that these negotiations, like, it's not unilaterally, bilaterally only Ukraine, Russia, the conflict. It's also Iran, it's in these negotiations. It's also China, it's also Venezuela. So what might seem like a bad deal with Ukraine might also include other things. Let's remember that the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad fell because Russian air defense systems did not protect them.
Of course,
that was negotiated.
Of course, it includes other things. That's why when they thought they got rid of the head of Syria, it was going to get better. And you had this terrorist dressed up like a Sunday school teacher, and then he took off his costume and became the terrorist that he was, and they're slaughtering Christians every day. This is what we do. Yeah. It's just chaos.
And it's no coincidence that the uproar in Syria is happening right now at the height of the negotiations. This is what we do. It's putting pressure on different points.
So much for the United States foreign policy, and we'll be back, okay?
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Let us turn our razors and knives and anything that is sharp to this piece called Greenpeace. You know, that radical environmental justice group that has organized and advocated for the complete and utter annihilation of anything that they believe, even incorrectly, is harmful to the environment. Have you followed this? They just received a verdict against them that may bankrupt them and put them out of business for good. Let me take you back. Can we just go back in time? Do you all remember the Dakota Access Pipeline, the allegedly dangerous pipeline that threatened to wreck the environment? Well, Greenpeace, just this week, was found liable in a civil suit by a jury to pay more than $660 million. That's almost $1 billion. Guys, it's almost $1 billion in damages for defamation. But guess what? For lying, okay, about the pipeline and the harm it would cause to the environment, and for inciting illegal behavior by its protesters that are organized. And guess what? This is the first time Greenpeace caused serious issues. Remember, Greenpeace in the Philippines successfully lobbied to end the cultivation and use of a certain type of genetically modified rice in the Philippines. And guess what? The rice, which was modified to be rich in vitamin A, would have helped millions and millions of Asian and Africans who suffer from vitamin A deficiency, with an estimated 250,000 to 500,000 cases of blindness occurring every year in young children because of it, half of which die within 12 months of becoming blind. Can you believe this? because the rice was genetically modified. That's a big no-no for Greenpeace. This may be the worst environmental organization on the planet, Tyler. The worst.
I'm not sure there's a lot of competition, but I'm very glad to see them held to account for these lies and the destruction that it caused. I mean, one of the main things we have seen from the green activist groups in recent decades, these groups were started to protect the environment. And many people, this didn't used to be a partisan issue. You had people like Theodore Roosevelt, former president, who started the National Park initiative so that we could preserve the environment for future generations, so we could enjoy it. Now we have a green movement that is focused on demonizing the cheapest source of energy, fossil fuels, very reliable, but they say, oh, it's going to destroy the world. Meanwhile, all their projections of this horrible destruction keep proving not to come true. We have all these predictions saying, oh, there's not going to be snow on Mount Kilimanjaro. Oh, wait, there's snow on Mount Kilimanjaro. We have these predictions that the Maldives are going to fall under the waves because of the rising sea levels. Guess what? That's not what happened. Carbon dioxide is a tiny amount of our atmosphere, and it's actually useful for plants. These groups are demonizing any human involvement in the environment, and that's the reason why they went after those GMO crops.
Let me go to, you wanted to answer?
Well, yes, I want to underscore that under free speech protected by the First Amendment, the award was issued only because the jury found that falsehoods were made knowingly with malice.
Yes.
This isn't, because I would defend the right of Greenpeace. They can argue a whole lot of things about whether there's going to be melting at the poles or otherwise. But here you have a situation where there's findings of fact after due process that they knowingly told lies that were calculated to cause damage to the pipeline and otherwise. And there really is very little that the free speech is intended to protect knowing lies. I want to underscore that.
Robert, help me understand what is gained by burning Tesla vehicles. There are a lot of people that others could disagree with George Soros or Bill Gates on the right, but are you going to go and burn their establishment? And what is happening to civility in our country? I heard Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett say on her podcast, oh, I'm so excited. March 29th is my birthday, and nothing will satisfy me more than you all continuing to destroy Elon Musk. And I said, that's a member of Congress. What's wrong with this picture, Robert? What is happening to us as a nation?
Well, I agree with you, Armstrong. I don't think people should be destroying Tesla. Also, I think people should be shooting Bud Light cans when they disagree with their political statements. I don't think that people should launch boycott because people have diversity, equity, and inclusion programs because they disagree with those political conceptualizations around that. I think we have to ramp down the temperature of our American politics, but that's going to have to start at the top of the heap with the President of the United States. And let's not act as if he has not attacked every single person on a personal level, including saying that Ted Cruz's wife was ugly and his dad was involved in killing Kennedy. We have to start saying that we want to be a more civil nation, a more Christian nation, get back to those beliefs and those values. That has to be something that comes from the top of the mountaintop. As Harry Truman had on his desk, the buck stops here. And that has to be where we begin this conversation on how we will improve the discourse in America when we return to our democratic principles and policies.
It's funny. What is, Louis, we're gaining by releasing the Epstein papers, the Kennedy papers? You got fake documents saying that John F. Kennedy Jr. referred to Joe Biden as a traitor, and anybody with a modicum of common sense knows that was the 60s, and Joe Biden didn't run for the Senate until 1972. These fake. What is the purpose of all this? What are we to gain from it? Transparency? Well, the public has a right to know?
No, I think this is just classic bread and circus. I think this is just a show from a group of in the Republican camp that want to use this to fuel flames for their re-elections in the coming midterms. Because we're like people, the public might not be thinking about the midterm elections, but all the lawmakers and senators are already campaigning. Then that's why they're voting the way that they're voting, and that's why Jasmine Crockett is saying something like that, and why we have Ana Paulina Luna making a show every week about the next docket of documents that's going to come out and how we need the truth on these old cases. I hope that in the process some transparency comes out of it, we learn something out of it, but I don't think it is anything more than political circus and trying to maintain that MAGA flame bright and fiery through the first months of the Trump administration, so that they can continue with their policy agenda.
But one of the things that comes out to me, Armstrong, why were these things classified anyway? I mean, it's a classified secret that the CIA put some of their plans in the State Department. I mean, you read 50 books disclosing these things anyway. And I think keeping it secret then fuels this conspiracy theory.
They're hiding something.
Yeah, they're really hiding something. There's overclassification is rampant. And this shows transparency should be the rule, not the exception.
I want all of you to walk in the shoes of astronauts for a minute. Imagine in June of 2024, the Biden administration sent you to international space, and they told you you were going to be there for 8 days, just 8 days. This is June in 2024. And all of a sudden, your spacecraft had some malfunctions. And you were delayed and delayed and delayed. And all of a sudden, Elon Musk offered his amazing technology to send to rescue these astronauts. But the government says no, 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 no. Then all of a sudden, just as 9 months, can you imagine adjusting back to gravity after being in space for 9 months? Can you imagine what you sacrificed? I can't even conceptualize how they survived for 9 months in space. But lo and behold, Donald Trump said Elon Musk would bring them home. And when I saw them splash in the water, and when I saw them come home after 9 months, and then I heard one of the astronauts say, ask this question, why did Biden, what did we do? What were the politics that leave us for 9 months and not attempt to rescue us? And Elon Musk said whatever you want to say about him, but he has the best technology on the planet for these kinds of missions. I'm asking you, Tyler, why? Why were they almost a year? And Robert is crying. I know, Robert, it brings about a lot of tears. We'll get you some tissue. Please tell us, Tyler. It's crazy.
It's an excellent question. I mean, part of me wonders if the president just forgot.
Well, he may have. That's possible.
This is the president that we had. I mean, how many things were signed by AutoPen? Anyway, so the thing that stands out to me about this is that Elon Musk brought them home. The very same Elon Musk who right now people are burning Teslas, attacking people who have nothing to do with Elon, by the way, just because, they hate Elon Musk. And this, I saw a map. This is the most blood-boiling thing. There's a map with personal information of Tesla owners out there. What? A map that plots you. And you have to, if you own a Tesla,
that's crazy,
and you're on this map, in order to get off this map, you have to convince the people who run the website that you already sold your Tesla and you don't have your electric vehicle anymore.
Man,
this is exactly like the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map in my mind.
Now I want to tell you, that's crazy.
But what
demonizing people and
what Tyler's pointing out, Armstrong, is that there's a whole lot of privacy issues that are raised that are very important that he points out. But that's what we're experiencing right now with the federal government. All the information, your tax information, the information you've given to Social Security, that's all in the hands of 19-year-olds. And people could hack and all that things. That's why it seems very cavalier, given the importance of privacy, that we've thrown that out the window.
And Armstrong,
the ones who are trying to restrain the government.
Armstrong, just real quick on the astronaut story. So literally every single thing you said was wrong. Every part of it. So the reason the astronauts were up there in the first place is because we had something called the Boeing Starliner, which did competition with the Dragon capsule, which is the SpaceX version. They had a thruster malfunction, which resulted in them having to spend additional time on the International Space Station. The Biden administration signed an agreement with SpaceX in August of last year to bring those astronauts back. This was the next launch window available because they have to send the capsules down on a schedule because there are only two docking points, one on the starboard, one on the leeward side, in order to dock in. So no, it was not a conspiracy by the Biden administration to lead the astronauts there. We say, how could they survive up there? Mark Kelly stayed on this International Space Station for nearly 2 years. The space station is the size of a football field and receives regular resupply missions. They were not lost in space floating around there until Elon came up and scooped them up.
Even I, Robert, can get a little carried away. And thank you for the clarity and making sure that we're dealing with facts and not drama and theater. Thank you. And on that note, even I can learn. And we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
You know, I noticed, Robert, that Tyler mentioned the auto pen and the president saying this week that Joe Biden was not cognitive and had no idea what he was signing and that everything was by auto pen. But, you know, Robert, the last time I checked, they've been using auto pens for the last 30 or 40 years. It's nothing new under the sun, Robert.
Yeah, do we have video evidence of Donald Trump signing all 1,500 of those January 6th pardons, or was some of those done by auto pen? There's evidence that some of the executive orders Donald Trump has signed thus far have been done via auto pen. And we're talking about cognitive ability. Which president do you think has a more cognitive decline? The one who dropped inflation from 9.2% down to 2.9%, or the one that wants to invade Greenland, turn the Panama Canal into a conquered zone, make Canada a state, put a hotel on the Gaza Strip, and wants to abolish the education department? When we're talking about the types of precedents that Trump is trying to create, what we're talking about is the exact thing that he was accused of during the campaign, which is trying to consolidate power within the executive branch, minimize the power of the judiciary and of the Congress, and essentially rule through presidential fiat while carrying out his political grudges. He's doing it directly, as they say in the hood, he's playing in y'all faces, and y'all aren't recognizing it.
Yeah. I think, Armstrong, the deficiency that was overlooked is that I believe that unprecedented, Mr. Biden, it wasn't the auto pen, it was that he pardoned people when there was no claim, no argument that they had committed any crime. Liz Cheney, Jamie Raskin, many others. No president in history has ever issued pardon to someone. He could issue pardon to you, me, anybody who walked on the sidewalk. I believe that's an extreme abuse of the pardon power, never intended for such a purpose. That ought to be the debate, not the auto pen issue.
So, Louis, what are we going to, well, let me just, I was about to ask you a question I already know the answer to. I was going to ask you, what's going to happen now that Donald Trump has signed the executive order to abolish the Department of Education? Well, we know what's going to happen. It's going to go to court. The judge is going to stop it. Congress gets to defund and abolish organizations that only Congress has funded, not the president. The president will appeal it, just like they've already appealed what has happened with Judge Joe Boasberg. They filed immediately with the U.S. Circuit Court. So we know exactly what's going to happen. Donald Trump is only telling his base in my campaign, this is what I promised, promises made, promises kept. Donald Trump knows that he's not going to shut down the Department of Education. Where is USAID? Where are the federal workers? All the things that he's trying to do through executive fiat. And what do we have? The court comes back and says what? Louis?
That's why I don't understand all these calls of fascism. Democracy is working. Balance of power is there. And every branch of government is doing what they're supposed to do. And they're defending their territory. You see Republican lawmakers also come out and say, no, that's not the executive branch's prerogative. They cannot close down the education department. So again, everyone's flexing, and I think it's good. It's literally the three branches of government. They're flexing their power. They're shaking the system, and all the old stuff that didn't work out will fall off, and the democracy will evolve and continue. There's no this fear mongering of fascism of the executive overpower. Trump has not refused any court order. Trump has not done anything that the judicial system hasn't stopped. Congress is going to be there. And do you think lawmakers come 2026, when Trump's approval ratings are not going to be the ones that he has right now, and the economy is going to be different if he continues on the road of tariff? Do you think the Republican lawmakers are going to continue to vote in line as they've really, really rarely done the past 3 months?
So you're saying Trump is still on the honeymoon? Well, this is a honeymoon.
Oh, yeah. And the Trump administration knows it. Trump White House officials have said that they have 8 months. 8 months. What's happening is blamed on this administration.
So let me say this. No, wait a minute, Robert. I got something else for you, buddy. I got something for you. Hold tight. Let me just say to you, when Trump signs these executive orders, don't get bent out of shape. There is a check and balance. It's meaningless until all the branches have spoken. Now, Robert, since you want to talk about something, I want to talk about your good friend, Fani Willis. You know, the person you ran against? I see why you were running against her, Robert, because you felt you could do a better job. Well, Fani Willis probably bit off a little more than she could chew. Fought for becoming nationally recognized for her trial against Donald Trump and her unethical affair, which she admitted to, and the absolutely embarrassing judgment that she be removed from the case for her misconduct. Guess what? Your good friend, Robert, has been ordered to pay $54,000 in the Trump case for what? Violating the state's open records law. And let me tell you what that is. These fees and litigation costs are being given to her as a result of the fact that she intentionally failed, according to the judge, requested records to an attorney on the case during a motion to disqualify her, Willis, from the case. Now, whether you have sympathy for her or not, this is not going to do anything to bolster her career, and only those blinded by their liberal blindfolds could see what was going on, and these prosecutors who fight like this and then don't hold themselves to the same standard of the law, this is the price they pay. $54,000, Robert?
Look, I've been on the defense side of the bench my entire career. And I think that these are the types of things that need to happen to make sure that you hold prosecutors accountable. At the end of the day, Donald Trump, like any other defendant in this country, deserves due process, deserves the rule of law to apply. And if outside organizations are requesting information or there are subpoenas that need to take place, then of course the prosecutor office needs to follow that rule. At the end of the day, we have to have laws that apply to all men in this nation equally, whether they be the president of the United States or someone who lives under a bridge. We cannot have the rule of law be dependent upon the individual and then start making exceptions thereof. I believe that strongly. But just to the point that was just made earlier about Donald Trump not denying federal court orders, a federal judge ordered him to turn the flights back around of the Venezuelans headed to El Salvador, and they tweeted about ignoring that order. So we can't make this argument that he has not ignored federal judges' orders when he literally just did it.
Let's come back to let me come back to you, Tyler. Do you believe that the media is doing a job of removing their opinions and their biases from the newsrooms and reporting the news? Do you think they've sort of gotten the message of where Americans are and what they rejected on November 5th, and the fact, whether you like it or not, Americans overwhelmingly want to give Donald Trump a chance to succeed on many of his policies because many of them they agree with, but they also want this check and balance system that we're seeing going on today?
Yeah, well, I think President Trump has really set a really great precedent by allowing outside voices from the legacy media to be in the pool with him at the White House. This is one of the #1 things that he can do to tell the legacy media, look, we're not putting up with you. We're not giving you the access that you long took for granted because you have been biased over and over and over and over again. And I think it is long past time that we acknowledge that the media landscape has changed. And that's not to say that legacy media aren't media. I mean, they deserve a seat at the table. But so do the new media outlets, so do conservative outlets like the Daily Signal. We now have a White House correspondent who is there asking really excellent questions. And this is a great step forward. But I don't see the legacy media outlets learning from their lesson from the election. Well, I do see the alternative media growing.
Well, I think you've omitted the fact that the Trump administration has now exiled Associated Press because it refused to describe the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. I don't have any objection to expanding voices, but they clearly and are in court right now challenging that suppression of their access because of their viewpoint.
So it's not centered on the Gulf of America.
It is centered on that. That was the reason why. That was the reason why he excluded them from the press pool. That's what he stated.
The Associated Press has the AP style book, which excludes various opinions from the discussion from the beginning. It says all reporters must act as though there is no dissent on climate alarmism.
That's not the reason the Trump administration decided. Tyler, you're not giving the reason the Trump administration gave for excluding AP. It was they didn't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. That's the position of the Trump administration.
But this news outlet has been pushing these ideologies consistently and trying to force the legacy media to silence opposing views. And that's the key issue that led them to cite the Gulf of America in the first place.
Well, let me just say this. I cannot thank Mr. Fein, Louis, Robert, and Tyler for joining us for a very, very insightful and lively discussion today. And we look forward to continuing this discussion because one thing we all love, we love freedom, we love liberty, we love America, and God first. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of our show.